Are you wondering if it's okay for you to take on additional contracts while working full-time in the school system? And you're trying to consider if legally you can do that or if there will be other ramifications if you try to do consulting part-time while working a full-time contract in the school system. Well, this is the video for you. I'm going to help you to think through this process and to figure out whether or not you can do consulting while you are still a full-time employee in the school system. So let's get into it. So the first thing, we're going to take into consideration the legal things as well as other items. So let's start with feasibility first. Let's start with whether or not it's feasible for you to work additional contracts. Now, when I say additional contracts, that means you're working full-time in the school system as a classroom teacher, as an administrator, as a school counselor, as a special ed teacher, whatever your role may be. And then someone or some type of way you talk with someone and they say, hey, we'd love for you to come over to our school, do a presentation for us, and we'll pay you to do the presentation. Or perhaps you're thinking about starting a consulting business where you pick up gigs or contracts on the weekend, after school, and days that you have available to go in and sell your expertise or your services. The first thing I want you to take into consideration before we get into the legal constraints, the first thing is feasibility. Do you have the time? Are you able to balance the time commitments of your full-time job that you currently have along with the commitments of the consulting work? Depending on what the consulting work is, it may just be one workshop, one seminar, one presentation, or it could be a series of workshops and presentations. It could be one-on-one sessions with teachers, working with a cohort, doing some group coaching, whatever it may be. Just make sure that you have the time physically to be able to do it, because it does take additional energy. And are you willing and ready to take on that commitment? Now, the answer that I will give you to this is, can you consult while still working full-time in the school system? All of us know teachers who work part-time jobs. Some of us know teachers who work full-time in the school system and work another full-time job. So that's not a question. The question is, can you? And each school system is different. Each school has their own set of policies and regulations. And so we'll get into that too. But the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, are you physically and mentally capable? Do you have the capacity, the amount of energy needed to work a full-time job and to consult on the side? Now, some will argue that we do extra duty contracts after school anyway. We stay after for 2 and 3 hours. We do the evening programs and we make sure that all of the events happen that need to happen in the school system. That's all very true. I'm just bringing to you questions that you need to consider. So let's get into the legal and ethical considerations that you need to think through. First of all, know your contractual obligations. I know as educators, many of us, we go above and beyond. We're always trying to or working to excel in our job, but is that a part of your contract? So the first thing I want you to do is review the terms of your contract. Are there any clauses that are in your contract that relate to secondary employment? Now, teachers don't so much see this as much as those on the administrative level. And a lot of times it will say you can't take on any employment that will be a conflict of interest. So the first thing you want to do, go get your contract out. You just signed that contract a couple of months ago. Go ahead, pull it out. After you looked at the yearly raise that was on there, there was some writing in between. Go ahead and look at your contract. In addition, you can go online and pull up your employee handbook, and the employee handbook will give you guidelines as well. Then you need to understand what constitutes a conflict of interest. Many times we will just read that it's a conflict of interest and then we'll stop. But you need to ask questions, because a conflict of interest could simply mean that me as a principal, I can't go over to another school and be a principal. That doesn't mean that me as a principal can't do workshops on instructional practices. So you need to understand what it means if your contract says anything that constitutes a conflict of interest. And then some of the questions you might ask yourself is it in the same field? If you're consulting in something that's totally out of the field, that's not education related, you should be totally clear. Now, you're going to double check on all of this. I'm just giving you my perspective. But if you are a classroom teacher and you are, say, consulting on an art project, you should be free and clear. So understand what it means. And then, is it directly related to your role? If it's not directly related to your role, you should be pretty clear. One of the ways that I often will talk to myself, I will say, okay, so if I were going to work at a grocery store, if I were going to work at Marshall's, or if I were going to work at the service station, would I need to report that to the school? So that means that it's out of the field. It's not in the field of education. It's not in conflict with my contract. And so I should be okay. And then the other question that you can ask yourself is, will you be sharing any proprietary information? Will you be sharing any trade secrets? Will you be doing or giving them any of the resources, information, or material that you use in your daily job at the school? So those are questions you need to ask yourself. The next thing I'm going to suggest that you do is just check out the school policies. Just check to make sure if there are any specific policies regarding moonlighting or secondary employment. Just that simple. Would I just call HR and ask them the question? People don't do that. Don't be lazy about it, because of course HR is going to give you a convoluted answer. Go ahead and do the research yourself. Your employee handbook is right there online. You can pull it up, look for the category headings, highlight it, get clear, and move on about your business. And then the next thing is, are there any disclosure requirements? Again, you can check to see, do you need to formally disclose your consulting gig to your administration? And if it's not clearly stated in your handbook and it's not outlined in your contract, you should be free and clear. And then make sure that you yourself maintain a separation of roles. Let me help you to understand. On your work computer, you should not be doing your consulting PowerPoint. You should not be doing your consulting research. You should not be using your work material and resources for anything that have to do with the consulting that you're doing. In addition, you need to make sure that you're not at work trying to get your PowerPoint or your deck or your copies made or any of that. There needs to be a separation of roles. And then, of course, we can't control how much information we share that is related to the school, because information is free, but you do need to make sure that you're not sharing any of the district material or information or data. So make sure there is a separation of roles. If you can do all of that and you can follow up with your handbook, highlight the sections, put a little tag in there. The biggest tip that I will tell you about consulting while working full-time in the school system is to simply keep your mouth shut. Stop talking so much. The reason why people know what you're doing is because you're telling them. And if you're going to run around telling the whole building, telling your next door neighbor, telling your colleague, telling your pod mate, all of the things that you're doing, and then they're running to tell the instructional coach, they're talking about it at lunch, because after all, it's just exciting news that now you're doing this consulting work, and now the word has traveled all over, and that's how HR gets involved. So the simple answer to the question is, you should be able to do it. And if you keep your mouth shut, no one would know. You don't have to post it on social media. You don't have to make an announcement on Instagram. You don't have to tell all of your school colleagues. You need to keep your mouth shut and things will be just fine. So this is another 10-minute tip, and I hope this helped. Consulting is an amazing way to bring additional money into your household, to use your expertise, and to live the life of your dreams. Maybe you're thinking about additional travel. Maybe you want to pay off some debt. Maybe you want to start an emergency fund. Whatever it might be, you can do it full-time or you can do it part-time. But the key to it all is that you must start. Hope this helps. See you in the next episode.